The recording, and then I can edit it because, for sometimes we have silences that can't be explained or gaps, or I say the word way too many times. So. Did you guys do some reading on this?
I did.
Yeah.
I wanted to watch the history episodes, but I didn't get that done. But I did read a lot of articles and watch a lot of other videos on it. So
good. Let's see. I'm going to, as we're going through the night, I'm going to share my screen as we're going through the podcast, because there was so much information. There were so many articles and so much on the and it's called the Uinta Range, the Uinta Basin. There was a lot of stuff on there. So hopefully my dogs will not bark and everything will go off without a hitch here. So, and did you get a hold of Matt?
Yeah, he's not messaging me back.
Hello, everybody. This is Colleen O'Hara with Pocatello Paranormal Research, and this is our podcast, Speaking of Spirits. And tonight we're going to be speaking about the Skinwalker Ranch in the Uinta Basin. And joining me tonight is Tim. Tim?
Well, howdy. I'm Tim. I like football, barbecue, and hunting ghosts.
And Carrie.
Hi, I'm Carrie. I'm just moving back to this area, and I love everything about the paranormal, and I'm looking forward to this.
Fantastic. Well, I know that probably a lot of our listeners have read or heard of the Skinwalker Ranch. And the Skinwalker Ranch is a pretty fascinating place, and it has quite a lot of history. But I thought before we'd kind of dive into the history of the ranch, we'd talk a little bit about just the Uinta Basin area. It's in Weber County, Utah. And it's pretty small. The population there is only 1,340. And it has grown. Population change since 2000 is 18.9%, maybe due to the oil and gas industry, which has really taken off in that area. Male-female ratios pretty even, 52.9% male, 47.1% female. The median resident age there is 36.5. The estimated median household income is $74.62, which is actually higher than the Utah median household income of $68,000. Again, probably due to the oil and gas industry in that area.
Maybe
so,
I need to move.
I know. Actually, Utah has some of the higher salaries from some of my other research that I've done. The common industry there, of course, is mining, quarrying, oil and gas extraction. It's a fairly conservative area. 76.6% voted conservative in the 2016 election. 7.8% voted Democratic. Religion is listed as 62% other and none at 28%, which is pretty interesting.
Yeah, that's especially for Utah.
Yeah, definitely. So the whole basin history there has been pretty interesting. I've done quite a lot of research for this episode, and honestly, it seems to be a hotbed of UFO activity. And starting in the mid-1800s, actually, UFOs were reported in local newspapers, which I thought was pretty interesting. And the ranch appears to be kind of in the epicenter of this whole basin UFO activity. So it's not unusual. I guess the ranch itself is unusual, but I wouldn't find it that people on the ranch seeing UFOs is that unusual, considering the amount of UFO activity out there. I'm sure you guys did a little bit of research preparing for this episode as well, and I don't know if you had anything before I dive into the UFO activity that I found.
Well, I think the thing that I find the craziest, maybe, is there's documentation for the last 50 years at this place. So it's not like it's a new thing. It seems to be active and it's remaining active.
Definitely. Yeah, so what I found in some of my, when you start diving into an area like this, you just keep going down these rabbit holes of information, and it's pretty interesting. So, like I said, about the mid 1800s, UFOs started getting publicized in the newspapers. There's been over 400 reports on UFOs that have been seen just between 1950 and 1990, which is fascinating. And a lot of these reports either make it into the local newspaper or they get sent in, and UFO tracking websites track these things. I know when I was in the service, we actually had a UFO tracking telephone number that we called in UFO cases. So I'll go over some of these reports, but in 1970s, there was a lot of publicized reports. Like I said, from 1950 to 1990, over 400 reports of UFOs. Some of these are pretty interesting. One of them came from a pilot in 1947 who saw a chain-like formation in the sky. And so that's one of them. Now, this picture is very similar to what the pilot reported, but this picture itself was taken at the Skinwalker Ranch. And it looks like, for the listeners, like a laser beam with lights coming down onto some pine trees. It's really an interesting UFO picture. On October 10th, 2019, a cluster of approximately 50 orange lights were seen over Bountiful, Utah. And that's not that far away, actually. It's just Bountiful would be a little bit northwest of this basin. April, May, June, July 2003, UFOs over Magna were reported. December 2003, lights over the Dugway Proving Ground were recorded. 2006, near the Utah-Colorado border, Ryan Skinner and his wife were near Thompson Springs when they saw a UFO about 20 feet behind their car, only about 7 feet off the ground, and it followed them. A lot of the people that have reported these things have missing time. And what I found interesting, that in this basin on the Ute Reservation, which borders the Skinwalker Ranch, a lot of the Indians there have reported UFOs, and some of the people who had pretty close encounters, like this one behind the car, they also have a high incidence of cancer. So, really fascinating. So I don't know what it is about this basin that makes it so likely to have a sighting, but with over 400 reported in a 50-year period or 40-year period, seems pretty likely that if you were down there at any given night, you might see something.
Sure might. Looks like we need to do a camping trip.
I think so, definitely. So the Skinwalker Ranch was also known as the Sherman Ranch, and that property is located, it's southeast of Ballard, Utah, and I'll put it on Google Maps so you guys can see where it is here for the people on this podcast. If you Google Skinwalker Ranch, Google Earth, it'll pop up. So I guess enough people have pinned it that it finally has its own location. And just to give you an idea, if you blow out here, zoom out on Google Earth, you'll see Salt Lake City is northwest. It's pretty much south of Vernal, a little bit southwest of Vernal, and you'll notice when you look at Google Earth, you'll see a lot of pinpoints on the map. Can you see my cursor?
Yes.
Moving? Okay, so that's all oil and gas extraction. You'll see a lot of oil and gas extraction. This whole basin is really rich in oil and gas, and so that's what all these little marks are. Okay, so then the Ute Reservation is directly to the north of this ranch. So some of this in here is the Ute Reservation, and I think it also goes out to the east. So the legend of the Skinwalker Ranch, again, it was known as the Sherman Ranch. It's on a property that's about 512 acres. There's some reports of anywhere from 480 to 520 acres, so I'm not sure why there's a discrepancy in that. And Skinwalker is a name taken from a Navajo legend, meaning a vengeful shaman. So I did some more reading on this. Apparently, the Navajos cursed the Utes with the Skinwalker, and the Utes cursed the Navajos with the Skinwalker during some kind of war that was going on between the two tribes. There you go. I'm not sure if the Skinwalker Ranch itself was the original name of this ranch, but it's been known now for several years as Skinwalker Ranch.
Some of the stuff that I found interesting in some of the articles I was reading was the radiation. And even when the History Channel was recording, one of their guys had some problems with the radiation. So that,
you mean they were exposed to radiation during the filming?
Yeah, let me pull this back up. I had it opened.
I actually watched the episodes.
Oh, you did? I want to.
And it was crazy. They were around a house and there was a well. And they were getting weird readings on the well. And so the guy who was kind of in charge of the TV series, I forget his name,
Dragon.
He decided to open up the well, and it was a big concrete slab. And when he did that, his radiation device went off. And the next day he woke up and he had radiation burns.
Wow.
But the craziest part is they went back there with guys that actually knew what they were doing with radiation. And they went back and there was nothing.
That's fascinating. So radiation is not unheard of in water. So if you have, different formation, different layers of water, right, and underground. And so if water is in a particular geologic zone, it can pick up radioactive material. So that's not unheard of. But I've never heard of radiation being there and then not being there. So that's fascinating.
Yeah. It was crazy all the way around. And, you wouldn't have believed it, but it was we saw the whole thing on TV. The guy did it, and he showed the burns and the note from the doctor, and they went back, and there was nothing.
The Skinwalker Ranch, how it really came to be famous, if you want to call it famous, was back in the 90s, right? The Shermans who owned this cattle ranch, they had bought this ranch, they had brought in all their cattle, and this was going to be their livelihood. Well, they made national history, national news with cattle mutilations going on this ranch. And the fascinating thing about their cattle mutilations were the cattle were cut open basically from stem to stern. All their innards were gone, and there was no blood nor any footprints around the cattle to suggest what did it. And it was also like they were cut with a scalpel or a laser. I mean, it was they weren't torn apart. These were not killings done from animals. And I remember back in the late 90s watching this on the news, and it was fascinating to me that this was happening. Their ranch wasn't the only place this happened. This happened also in Colorado. It happened in Arizona, Nevada. I'm not sure if it happened I don't think I remember anything in Idaho, but there was like a grouping of these cattle mutilations that went on for a couple of years and then they stopped.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it was the second to last or last episode of the Skinwalker Ranch, they actually caught on video a cow dying, and right when it died, you saw something in the sky shoot up.
Yes, I did see that, and I have one of those pages bookmarked, and that might be that photo here of that object going over the pine trees. Yeah, they did catch it on video of the cow dying, or at least reacting to whatever was right above it in the trees.
Yeah.
So, this goes on. The Shermans started losing quite a lot of cattle. They were losing their dogs. Apparently their dogs were the dogs would go after something kind of unseen. They would go out and then you could hear them being attacked. So as this goes on, they're losing their livelihood. So they ended up having to sell the ranch. But by now, everybody knew about what was going on, and the ranch was sold, I think at that time, to this wealthy business owner. I think he owns a chain of hotels, and he's out of Nevada. Well, they buy it to make this kind of paranormal research center, which I think is fascinating. I wish it was still going on. So they call in all these experts, and I'm talking about people who have quite a lot of background. Let me get to. Okay, the skinwalkerranch.org, for the people who are listening, they have quite a lot of information, and it's pretty well-designed website. So they call themselves the Science Application International Corporation. And they are, it says the SAIC is the premier technology integrator solving our nation's most complex modernization and readiness challenges across defense, space, federal, civilian, and intelligence markets, right? So I'm not sure. Apparently, they become involved with the Skinwalker Ranch, and Harry Reid actually secured some funding to study what's going on at the Skinwalker Ranch. And then enter some of these players, right? You've got Dr. Thomas Lakatsky. He's a doctorate in nuclear engineering. I mean, you've got, let's see, there's more people that they describe. Kelleher, I think he's Irish. And he's, what's his background here? Senior research scientist with a 20-year career in cell and molecular biology. So they put together this team of these people with these, outrageous backgrounds, and they went to the Skinwalker Ranch and studied it.
And I think what says a whole lot about that is, from what I could tell, they didn't have any answers. And usually when they leave something a blank sheet like that, it means they couldn't disprove it too.
Right. Yeah, so they were down there, and I guess they were down there on and off for quite a while to try to figure out if they could put together obtain footage and try to figure out. They set up experiments, try to figure out exactly what was happening at this ranch. Some things, I think they were the ones that did capture the cow dying and the UFO above the trees. There's also been reports that still to this day, there's military in and out of this place. So even though it's changed hands now, and actually the guy who owns it now I think he started Caldwell Banker. I think that was the case. There's still military in and out of there, like top brass military in and out of this place. So it's kind of fascinating. I don't think they allow the public in there. It's pretty tight-lipped about what they're doing in there at this point. Here we go. Colonel John B. Alexander, apparently he's been in and out of there.
Well, I think maybe the better question is, what can't you find there?
Right.
There's a list of everything: paranormal, the UFOs, Indian legends, everything. And I think that's really interesting. Is we have on paper the 50 years of the experiments and everything that they've done, but before that they have Indian stories. So that place has been active for whoever knows how long. they have stories passed down. That's quite the thing.
Right. Some of the things I was trying to research when I was looking at this are there some like plausible, rational explanations for some of the things that's gone on down there? Certainly, I'm not a molecular biologist, right? But you got to wonder. I mean, is there? We have other places in the United States and certainly the world that has oil and gas and large deposits, kind of like this basin. We have other places. So that doesn't seem to be drawing the UFO activity or all the other paranormal type occurrences, because there's the Bracken Shell in Texas, and there's all of these other places where you have oil and gas extraction that are not having these issues crop up. So what is it about this basin itself? If you go and you look at it, and I even read this, so I went and I looked for myself. If you look at Google Earth and you zoom out and you have the Skinwalker Ranch, it almost looks like this is a cratered deposit of a meteor that has hit the ground from the east to the west and pushed this valley into place, because it doesn't fit the characteristics of any of the landscape around it. I found that fascinating theory. One of the articles I did find is doesn't say what year, but there's been strange noises been heard in this basin for quite a long time. There's this newspaper article that says the title is "Rumblings Heard in Uinta Basin. Strange noises cause settlers much uneasiness." December 30th, many residents of Utah and the East who have been in the Uinta Basin since Election Day, examining lands they purchased at the Provo government sale, have noticed with wonder occasional rumblings and resembling explosions or distant thunder that can be heard throughout the section at intervals every calm day and night. There's been much speculation as to the nature or cause of this phenomenon. Various theories have advanced, some more or less fanciful or imaginary. Homesteaders have muffled detonations every quiet day since the former Uinta Indian reservations were opened for settlement over 5 years ago. I found that really fascinating.
Yeah, it is. I have a friend that lives right outside Vernal, and I've asked her a few times if she's seen anything crazy or felt anything, and that's the only thing she's brought up. She said that she hasn't seen anything in the sky. She hasn't been to Skinwalker Ranch. She hasn't done anything like that. But every once in a while, there's a rumble, and it's to a point now that everybody just writes it off as normal. And I don't think anybody in the world would do that.
No. Well, over the last about 30 or 40 years, actually, strange noises have been heard all around the world. And there are websites that record these noises. But this is different. This sounds like it's coming not from the sky, but the ground. One explanation was that it could be the slipping of a layer of rocks over the Uinta Fault, which extends about over 100 miles north and south along the base of the Wasatch Mountains. Having grown up in earthquake country in California, I don't remember rumbling ever along the fault lines that we lived on. So, not saying it couldn't happen, but I've never heard of it.
Well, going back to the friend, a lot of people blame it on all of the the natural gas and the oil that they're pumping out. But I
Possibly.
don't think anybody's ever.
Right. Okay.
But I would think that would be the same thing like up in North Dakota or anywhere where they're pumping oil and gas daily. I mean,
Right.
The Bakken.
You don't hear anybody in Texas saying that.
No. I mean, and the Bakken up in North Dakota is huge. I mean,
Yeah.
And I mean, yeah, there's people that have UFO sightings up there too, but nothing like what is happening down there. The other thing I found interesting when I was reading some of these articles and everything was that almost everybody that has done investigating down there has had problems with their equipment.
Like what?
Yes.
Their devices break down, they won't work. Let's see if I can find this one article real quick.
Well, going back to the TV show again, in just about every episode, something happened. One guy had, I think it was a $30,000 thingy that flies with a remote control. The name just left me. But it was unresponsive.
The drone? Was it
The drone? Yeah, the drone.
Good grief. Man. When I opened my mouth, it was there, but nothing came out. And the phones, everybody's phones had issues. All the batteries were draining. It was interesting. I enjoyed every episode.
Yeah, I didn't watch them all, but I watched several of them. And you look down here, if you zoom in on Google Earth, there doesn't seem to be any. I would almost expect that if there was like a large transformer for electricity somewhere down there, or the ranch was underneath, the transmission lines. You can have a lot of problems under transmission lines, but there's nothing there.
Well, that brings an interesting point. When we were investigating the gun plant, and it had those huge power generators.
Right.
It did crazy things to me. I got lightheaded, and it was just kind of weird for a second or two there.
Yep.
And when they were analyzing some of the dirt samples, I guess dirt samples is wrong. When they were trying samples to get in through a cave, their detectors went all over the place, and they had that same energy. And I watched the show before the gun plant experience, and thinking back on it, my feelings were exactly the same that guy had. So there may be some serious energy production somewhere down there.
Well, that's fascinating. When I look down, when there are some maps that you research, some oil and gas maps, and tried to overlay them to the ranch area. I can't find any explanation for some of the things that were happening down there. I mean, to me, this doesn't look any different than a lot of places geologically in the Utah, Colorado, Idaho areas. This isn't to me that much different. Yeah, so I've gone back down to this Google Earth, and I've looked around all over the place in here around the Skinwalker Ranch. I don't see anything that would cause electrical interference or radiation. One of the articles I did run into was this element, I think it's 115, which isn't an element found in nature. It's found in the atomic, it's a result of an atomic collision, right? Or that's how I interpreted it. And so they have actually found, they said at one point up to 3 pounds of element 115 in this basin around the ranch. Now, why would that be there? I can't find anything that suggests that there was any kind of atomic testing down in this basin.
Well, and it wasn't until recently that they admitted that that existed. I think it was the late 70s, but I could be wrong.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Carrie, what were you looking into?
Well, right now I'm looking at the what they're saying the hoaxes could possibly be is what I'm looking at right now, but that's all government and military.
So, what, trying to cover up things at the ranch, or what?
Well, there's, yeah, like this one I'm looking at right now. It says the Skinwalker Ranch myth is a hoax by the government to keep people away from a facility that's there. And that's why they've now got it fenced off, and you can't, it's hard for anybody to go in that doesn't have clearance, basically. So,
Well, according to the people that live around there, they do see government people in and out of there now. But I do believe that it really was a cattle ranch, a working ranch, and I do really believe that the Shermans owned this place and that they were losing their shirt with these mutilations.
right.
I mean, I really believe that.
This is something that I think, let me see if I can look real quick.
Well, for those listening, Element 115 was talked about since the 70s. The guy brought it up. That's probably a whole different podcast. But they synthesized and made the Element 115 in 2003.
Okay.
Thanks, Google.
Right?
This is just somebody's opinion on what they think is going on there, that the government is hiding something there.
Oh.
And that's why
okay.
they have now sealed it basically off to where you have to have clearance to go in. And they're showing pictures of the cameras that they have around the entrances to the ranch.
Right.
So,
Well, I know the guy that bought it. He's invested a lot of money and security to try to have an enclosed environment so he can explain some of the things that are unexplainable. Yeah.
Are you talking about the current owner now?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, so the cattle mutilations weren't the only thing that happened at this ranch. There were ferocious animals with piercing yellow eyes. Although they were seen, they left few tracks and in a few cases were not injured when struck by bullets. So there was a story about this thing that kind of looked like a werewolf, but not. So I don't know what else there could be other than paranormal. I mean, when we go into a location, we try to debunk what we can. You look for the obvious explanation. You look for high EMF readings to tell your client that feeling of being watched could be because of a fear cage effect, right? So you look for a rational explanation. But everything at Skinwalker Ranch, there doesn't seem to be a rational explanation.
Yep, I agree. And
there isn't big transformer lines anywhere. There isn't like an electrical substation sitting right outside the gate. Why would someone get radiation burns from uncovering a well and their Geiger counter's going off, and then the next day the Geiger counter reads nothing? That makes no sense.
There's no explanation that I know of. But it's radiation in a whole is something that I don't think us normal people grasp. We get hit with so much every day from just regular surfaces, TV screens, sun, all that stuff. But it's not enough to have any adverse effects to have something that concentrated just from opening a well. I don't think anybody can explain.
No, certainly not enough to give you a burn. You know, when I worked in Texas, there was a small community. They were very concerned because they ended up with radiation in their drinking water. That's not unheard of because the aquifer that they were pulling their drinking water out of was flowing across a granite formation. Granite, by nature, has radiation in it. So the water was picking up low levels of radiation, but it wasn't enough to cause a problem. But it was enough to register, and that's what concerned everybody. But certainly not enough radiation to give you a burn.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a lot of radiation.
It really, really is. And good old Mother Nature, this last, I guess it was 2 summers ago, I was walking through a 40-acre parcel that my family owns. And I love nature. It's kind of my place that I find my zen. And I was walking through and everything was absolutely quiet. And usually, especially in Idaho, there's all kinds of noises, bugs, birds, whatever you want to say. And there was nothing. And you know the feeling you get when you're getting watched? I got that. And it's amazing how when your senses pick up like that, what your mind kind of puts together. And I think that with nature especially, you can run into places and things that are unexplained every day. And there's nothing that you can explain it to. But that concentration level of weirdness in that one area, it would be, I think, amazing just to stay there for a night and to see if you could figure out if it was your psyche or if it was nature, if it was explainable, and if you could have the rationality to come through the next morning and be able to determine whether it was you coming up with that or if it was Skinwalker Ranch. That's kind of something that I felt the whole time when we first mentioned about doing this podcast. If I was given that situation, could I, me, Tim, that had that experience out in the 40-acre parcel and freaked myself out, that I'm very familiar with, go to Skinwalker Ranch and be subjective? I don't know.
I think it'd be really hard to not lose your cool.
Yeah.
Knowing, if you went in there knowing everything that we've read, right? So I'm sorry if anybody's listening to the podcast. My dogs are snoring. It sounds like the Navy barracks right now. So just so you know, that's what that noise is. It's hard not to scare yourself silly. You know, people ask all the time, do we get afraid when we're doing our paranormal investigations? And I have to say, no. But there are times when you get that creep factor. You feel the skin, you know, your hair on the back of your neck, and you stand up and the skin tingle. And man, no one, if you were familiar with everything that has been written about and you watched everything there was to see about Skinwalker Ranch, going down there, I think it would freak you out a little bit. Not lying.
Well, for sure. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And
But I go? Absolutely. Man, I'd be down there tomorrow if I could get the invite. Absolutely. Just to experience it. Just experience it.
Yep. Me too. It would be fun. If Brandon is listening, send us an invite. We'll go.
Hey. Thank you for joining us on another episode of Speaking with Spirits. This is Colleen O'Hara with Pocatello Paranormal Research, signing off.